Hey, I'm Warren Sprouse here on the Bible Forum. We're here every Sunday night just for you from 8 until 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Love for you to join us live. You can jump in the chat room and torment all the folks that are there. I want to talk to you about raising children and teaching them to reason. This article comes from some discussions in a publication called the intellectualtakeout.org. It's a good website to tap into and be fed by. When you are teaching your children the rules of the road, do you teach them to actually think and reason between opposing arguments? Or do you just tell them this is right and that's wrong? And if you learn this and you learn that, you'll be okay. Apparently, critical thinking has become a buzzword in education in the last few years. It sounds like a worthy educational goal. Something to ensure that every student can leave school knowing how to reason and make connections. But the real question becomes how this instruction is taking place. Is it possible that schools are encouraging students to think based on their emotions and their feelings rather than their intellect and their knowledge? In our educational system, do established facts rule, or is it something else? The author of this piece I came across in a blog entitled The Quirky Teacher. This is at thequirkyteacher.wordpress.com. In a recent post, she mentions the increasing regularity with which children are told to analyze and assess situations through the medium of their feeling. How do you feel about that, Mary? How do you feel about that, Johnny? They were asked to rate the lesson that the teacher was teaching with the appropriate smiley face. And there were several to choose from. Now, according to the Quirky Teacher, this assessment leads children down a rabbit trail of emotion-based thinking, which runs in this, I suppose, logical way. I have to make a decision, I'm giving a choice, and I have to evaluate how I thought, how I felt, what was really going on here. So I'm given choices like, I wasn't bothered before, I just accepted it. But now that I think about it, or I actually don't like fractions because it's a little bit tricky and I got a few questions wrong. Or this must explain why I don't feel good compared to, say, a day at Alton Towers where I don't make any mistakes at all. I don't know what Alton Towers is. Fourthly, come to think of it, I don't like any math lessons, period. And lastly, math makes me sad. So, which of these fits how you are feeling, thinking at the moment? This is a heavy dose of emotional reasoning. It's followed by the child's reaction. A child will typically be asked to make the right choice. But when they're asked to think about how they feel about it, rational thought goes out the door. Think about how you react to children in your midst, whether they're your children, grandchildren, or children you teach, or Sunday school, or wherever you might meet them. Is the right choice the focus, or how they would feel about going home right now? Would you like to go home? We're at the beach. Would you like to go home now? I think you would feel better if you were at home. This is the kind of stuff we get all the time. It sends a message to the child that they can simply make up the rules of life based on how it all makes them feel at any given time. The quirky teacher also notes that, quote, constantly asking them to look inwards to examine how they feel leads to great unhappiness and worry. You want your children to have that? Now do you begin to understand why so many young people suffer with various levels of depression? Depression within young people is almost epidemic. Now, keep in mind we have to factor in the psychologists and others who run to depression as soon as anybody tells them they're feeling sad. But that's another discussion. In November of 2016, it was discovered that the number of young people ages 12 to 20 reporting a major depressive episode had actually increased by 37%. That between 2005 and 2014. Is it possible that these increases could be related to the so-called pride of place, which feelings and emotions have been given in school and culture in general? The fact is that emotions are a good thing. But like so many other good things, if we allow them to control our life or our thinking, pretty soon we're going to be an absolute wreck. It's high time that schools began to take these sorts of things into consideration. If we stop training children to frame their thinking around emotional impulses and instead gave them instruction in absolutes and rational discourse, would we see a more capable, well-adjusted population of young people? We have an educational system in our country that was established by a leading psychiatrist back in the 1930s. And he actually said out loud in print that he wanted to create a psychological laboratory in each classroom. And he began initially to undermine a child's ability to learn to read. I grew up with that curriculum in the 1940s. Maybe you remember See, Spot, Run. Dick and Jane. This was when we moved away from actually learning how to read phonetically, what the sounds were, how they went together, what was going on, to what's called sight reading. Sight reading is so much better. We now have upwards of 40% of our population that can't really read except on a 4th grade level. Prior to that, young people were prepared for college at home. And by the time they were teenagers, they were off to college. We have dumbed down the system. I started a school in 1979. We started with preschool, kindergarten, and we taught them to read. And we told the parents, you put this child in school in September, 4 years old, 5 years old, and when we have our Christmas program, they'll be able to read anything you put in front of them. No, not science books and technical, but age-appropriate stuff. And every parent did what you just did. Oh, come on, we did it year after year after year. If you teach children how to sound out the letters, they don't even have to know what the words mean. They can say it. They'll learn later. And That's what education's about. Every year, building on what you learned the year before, and making it bigger, getting into it more, and then adding to it. That's what it's a cumulative effect. Today we've got children in high school, they can't read. And you're going to tell me that's not purposeful? And look at the way young people live today. Whew, I would not want to be one of them.